Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Grow Great Live. I'm Ria Lala, and I'm with my awesome co-hosts, Antonia Dodge and Mariana Pollack. And today we're talking about how to create those moments. As a parent, we all know them, those moments where we can have learning take place and also create connection with our kids. We call those the teachable moments. So we're going to be sharing with you in this down and dirty episode on how we can create those teachable moments and create more of them so that you get what you want as your parents. All right, so Antonia, let's start us off with this. Teachable moments. What comes up for you?
So I have two that have always seemed to work the best for me. And this is in the context that, I mean, what my 2.5-year-old, I'm still trying to figure out the teachable moment thing. It's sometimes difficult to recall back to a previous incident where it feels like every time she blinks, the world is like brand new for her. But I do have a 6 and an 8-year-old two stepsons that are 6 and 8. And I've noticed that there's two situations that are ideal for me in teachable moments. The first one is when I have screwed up royally. When I have totally screwed up, I almost invariably take that as a teachable moment for them because I feel like it's incredibly important. I'm not a big fan of believing that the parent should always look perfect. I'm not a big fan of believing that when you've screwed up, you've got to keep your wall up and you have to like present as if there was nothing wrong and you never did anything wrong because you're the parent in order to maintain control. I actually think that you show a lot more power and self-authority in a situation when you've totally fucked up that you're willing to admit it. So that's what I do in those moments when I've completely bit it, like I've said something awful or I have done something awful or I have behaved in an awful way, and I have royally behaved in awful ways. I've said things where I'm like, I can't believe that exited my mouth. Who was that person? That was a horrible human being. I can't believe I did that. I always own it and apologize to the kid. And then I take it as an opportunity to show, look, you don't have to be perfect all the time. That's not going to happen. However, this is how you handle when you have screwed up. This is how you handle it. This is how you go through the steps of owning your mistakes. And, and this is what it can look like when you pan out. And you don't actually lose power in the situation. You gain power by acknowledging you've messed up. So that's one opportunity that I take. And the second one is I've noticed that the best teachable moments come when I'm on a car drive. When it's me and the other kid on the other side of the car. There's something about a car drive that creates a sense of intimacy. Like you can't escape, you can't go anywhere. And you're just, I don't know what it is about a car. Maybe it's the intimacy, maybe it's the fact that you're traveling from one place to the other. But I've noticed that a lot of openness comes up. Like I tend to open up, the kid tends to open up. And so me and my stepsons have had the best conversations when I've gone, hey, why don't we go for a car ride? And if there's something that we've been needing to talk about, I'll initiate the car ride. I'll be like, hey, can you go with me to the store? Or can you go with me to go do this thing? Sure, absolutely. And they love riding up front because in our state, the 8-year-old can ride up front and he never gets to ride up front. So he gets really excited by it. So he rides up front. And we go for a car ride and I'll take detours and I'll go the long way so that we can have that sense of intimacy in that moment. And some of the best teaching moments, some of the best conversations, some of the best sharing has happened in those car rides. So I would say that that's my quick tip. My quick tip is to, if you need to talk about something, if you need a teachable moment, take them on a car ride. And in that context, I've noticed the best stuff opens up.
Good stuff.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Antonia. Totally agree with you. And both my sons are different. And for the older one, the car ride totally works. And we use that heavily, both my husband and I, whether we picked him up from school or, we're taking him to the soccer practice. It's, I think he opens up, I think he feels protected. It's a kind of like it's a tight container for him to express himself. And also, and at the same time, it feels like he can't go anywhere.
Right.
So might as well listen to, what my parents have to say. So that works really well. And for the younger one, he loves to cuddle. So we, no matter what happens in any point of the conversation, we make sure that we are either holding each other or cuddling with each other. And that's when he's really the safest to open up to me. And that's when we come to really good conclusions and really good learnings for both of us. And I totally agree with you about having a teachable moment when you screw up yourself. And I actually had a great teachable moment when I got a ticket for illegal U-turn. And it's all about lying because, I try to teach them that lying is never going to produce any good results. It might give you a good short-term result, but long term it's just not going to happen. So long story short, made a turn. The cop stopped me. They were both with me in the car. He said, did you notice that turn, the sign that there's no U-turn here? And I said, oh no, I totally didn't. And I felt immediately this, judgmental energy from them coming, like, what? They actually didn't say anything. And after, we were done and we were on our way, they really made sure on the car ride home to tell me that I was lying and it was not okay and I shouldn't be doing that. And actually that went on, for a couple of good hours when I, admittedly said, I said, yes, I'm sorry. That's not what I'm trying to teach you. I really did bad. And, guess what? I'm going to have to pay not only the fine, I will have to go to traffic school. So that's, for me, it's a direct consequence. So I think that's a really good idea to use the teachable moment when you screw up yourself. And then also what I've noticed is the best teachable moments happen when, even if something happens that the child breaks the rule or there's a discipline that's supposed to, something happens that the child misbehaves. And in that moment, when you get emotional or fly off the handle, like, it happens to us many, many times, it is not a good way to handle it right there in the moment. For the most of the time, better actually doing it later on. And I know that, Ria, you're an expert on that. So, why don't you tell us about how you do it, in a way that it's, really, really tangible and good for the kid and yourself.
Well, you said it perfectly, Mariana, when you said that it's not always in the moment. And that's really it, is that there's the assumption that whenever something happens and that has to be addressed with your children, that the teachable moment is right there. So it's first just confronting that the teachable moment most often will not occur when the issue is taking place. Because the teachable moment is where the learning is occurring, where the awareness, where the neurons are firing. They're like, oh yeah, oh, I could do this instead. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. That moment occurs generally not in the moment when emotions are flared. So looking for the teachable moment is really finding out, just as Antonia said, what is it? It may be a car ride. For my kids, it's right before, like, it's a very intimate time right before bed. We're all cuddled up, we're lying down, we're playing with each other and giving each other massages, and it feels very close and connected. Nobody's angry, nobody's talking about shoulda, woulda, couldas, and in that moment, I'm able to ask them questions and be curious about, hey, do you remember this morning when you got really upset with your sister and then you kind of shoved her toys over there? And then he can go, yeah, and there's no part of him, the goal here is not to create any sort of defensiveness. So when we aren't triggered, again, this is about our own self-regulation because we are reliving it, and we're reliving it for them in the form of a narrative. So when we relive it for our children, we have to make sure that we're still not emotionally triggered, that we've really let that go, and now we're in neutral, loosey-goosey, lovey-dovey territory, and now we're just kind of both together looking at that misunderstanding or that issue over there. And then together we're strategizing, hey, well, you know what? Was there anything that we could have done to express our anger? Or is there anything we could have done instead of push our toys? And then stay silent and let them brainstorm with you. And whatever they say, you go, great idea, that's a good one. Even if it doesn't make any sense. Great idea. What else have you got? And what else have you got? And then eventually they're going to come up with 10 different things. Well, I could have just gone and played with my own toys, or I could have done X, Y, and Z, until they get to some of the really meaty, creative ones that allows you to go, the penny drop. This is the internal direction that we were talking about in previous episodes. So again, teachable moments, usually not in the moment, it's long after. And the biggest hack that I would say is, if you are doing the teachable moment in the moment, like right there in the moment, the first thing, and I can't say this enough time, is it's right brain is emotional, left brain is logical. Never lead with logic. Always lead with an emotional connection first, where you've regulated and you're emotionally connected to them and they feel that. And then when their animal's calm, your animal's calm, you guys, because remember, their nervous system is tied to you. This is actually a really important distinction. When a mother comes into a space, she doesn't have to say anything. Everyone can tell whether mom's pissed or not, right? We all know that from our own family. So their nervous systems are tied. So if that's the case, we need to make sure that when we talk about being connected to them, what we're saying is my nervous system in a place where we can help regulate them? we're holding space for their nervous system so that they can get into like a same vibrational frequency with us, and we have to lead that. So in that, if that happens first, then the teachable moment can be right there, where you can use the language, use your nonverbal cues, and then lead with the right brain, emotional side, connect, questioning, curious, and then go in with the left once everyone's calm.
Just to piggyback on top of that, I think in particular when you have stepchildren, to lead with that emotional connectivity is so incredibly important, because there is not an assumption of intrinsic love. There's just not an assumption, because you're not, oh, well, for me, I'm the stepmom and I have stepkids. But if you're stepfather and you have stepkids, there's no just assumption of natural biological love there. And so to lead with love, or to lead with an emotional connectivity experience with them, is so important, because then they know that you're not just the person who's trying to dominate them. You're not just the person who's trying to behavior control, but you actually are invested in them as people. You're invested in them and their behavior. And so I think it obviously is important for everybody, but just to speak from the perspective of a step parent, sometimes it's really challenging, because you don't have that biological component. You don't have an automatic assumption of investment in the child. And because you're building that relationship with them over time, you're building the relationship of, like, you're not trying to take over for the biological parent, but you are invested in them as human beings, and you do love them as human beings. That connectivity is doubly so. It's that whole, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that relationship with your stepchildren is, I mean, it's just, to establish that is even sometimes more important than taking the teachable moment. Is make sure that even when they screw up, you're still there with love. You're still there with emotional connectivity, that is still important to you. So so being able to, of course, call that up for yourself as a step parent is sometimes difficult, but it's so imperative.
And one point that I want to just add with that is, when we talk about, which both of you have like very eloquently put forward, is to be very vulnerable and authentic with our kids, but where we've screwed up, or our kids love authentic stories and authentic transmissions much more than they like imagination, because they know on a visceral level that they're getting something real. If you tell them about some point in your life when you were 10 years old and you were lonely on a playground and you had no friends and people called you names, they love that story much more than once upon a time. So sometimes parents might feel that if they give too much, if they share too much about their own vulnerability, of their own screw-ups, that it might undermine them, or they might be used against them, or there's some kind of like power issue that might happen. And the answer to that is no. What you're doing is actually creating more deeper understanding, more intimacy, which is why I believe that there are no bad moments. Even when you royally screw up, if you want to create, even, there are moments where I've had with my kids where something has gone where like super suboptimal, and I say to myself, where we got to from that screw up to where we got after, I'm so glad it happened, because the level of intimacy, understanding, appreciation, growth on both sides could never have happened. So there are no bad moments. So if you look at it like that, you can't go wrong.
Yeah,
definitely. And ultimately, there are always a lot of teaching moments and teachable moments, and it doesn't have to be direct, because what we are talking about is direct, you know, when our child does something or when we do something. You can also remember to go the indirect route, which is, you know, and I can think of two of them that I've used before, and maybe you can chime in. One of them is, if you are a passerby, a situation that is happening that has nothing to do with you, and you can use that, you know, as you're walking away from that, to say, hey, what did you think about that, you know, that interaction with the parent, you know, and the child? What do you think about that? And then another one is during watching movies, you know, whether we're at the movies and, you know, we get out and we discuss it, you know, beat it to the pulp, or we're at home and we pause it and say, so what did you think about that? Which gives them a totally different way to express themselves. What are they all about? How they see the situation, how it can be better, how it got to such a bad point where they're not directly, you know, it's not directly directed to them, and they don't feel like they have to be defensive about it, or, you know, trying to say the right way that is going to please the mom. They just can be themselves. Hey, you know, we're just discussing this. There's no harm, no foul. So remember the indirect ways.
I love, love, love that. Looking for movies. All of a sudden, you don't feel guilty if the kids watch a movie, when you can have some discourse after and some learning. But one thing that just occurred to me as you were saying that as well is, we talk about the teachable moments as if there was something that didn't go right and, was suboptimal. But looking for the teachable moments when they've nailed it and it's joyous, and in that moment, instead of going good job or anything, you just go like this, or you give them a
Yeah.
thumbs up, where it's so subtle and
Yeah.
they are internally directed. Why is mom winking at me? Mom's winking at me because she thought that was like I was just a rock star. That has so much more power sometimes than even saying that was awesome, that was so great. Number one, and two, it's just like a tiny, like, very quick reminder that what you're doing is awesome. Like if he's sharing with his sister, or if he's eating all this food on his plate, or whatever it is. So catch them doing
Oh,
something
yeah.
good. Catch them doing something good, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Always.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right.
I would say the last thing that I would tag on to the end of all that too is that sometimes with my husband and I, between my husband Joel and I, if we have any sort of tension or issue between us, sometimes, and we haven't actually agreed, like outspokenly agreed to do this. We just start doing it. We start going through the process of how we came to an agreement out loud. Like if we have tension or if we're upset with each other, we'll just start talking about what happened as if, because we're so connected together that oftentimes we don't have to talk about that anymore. Like we got pissed off, now we made up, and then it was over. But sometimes we'll actually, knowing the kids are like in the back of the car or observing us, we'll start talking out loud about what happened internally for us. Well, this is what I felt, and this is what I picked up that you were feeling. Is that what you were feeling? And we'll actually go through the process of the entire internal dialogue, just knowing that they're observing. And we didn't have to do that, but we chose to do that in front of them, just to explain and give them an experience of how that can look.
And then kids don't have to be afraid of conflict because they see conflict having a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
Most
Exactly.
times people see the resolution happens outside of the kid's experience. And so they
Exactly.
never actually learn any coping skills or any negotiation or collaboration skills. So why deny them the richest part of that? This is not a fight where pots are flying and fists are flying necessarily, but certainly for the run-of-the-mill disagreements or, arguments, having a component of that, all aspects of it shown to the child, is so important for them to learn moves for results.
And not sweeping it under the rug, not not manufacturing or synthetically creating agreement or peace by like going, well, we were really mad at each other and then we stopped talking and then we never revisited the topic. We make sure that we revisit it in front of them. We make sure that they see the middle and the end. So it's not just a matter of like putting it on the carpet and that, like that thing is still there, but we just never handled it. We take the time and effort to talk about it in front of them so they do see that whole process. And we think that's really important. So I would say that that's probably the third teachable strategy that we've really implemented.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, guys, I hope you enjoy this episode of Grow Great Live. We're looking forward to bringing you much more in the future. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time.